Fazil Kakodia, I mean, Katkodia, I don't know how to pronounce that name. Maybe you can unmute yourself and ask the question, please. Faisal, or I don't know how to pronounce that, please go ahead. Unmute yourself and ask your question. You have to unmute your microphone. Yes, go ahead.
Apologies.
Please introduce yourself.
My name is Faisal Ketkodia. I belong to a South African movement called Musa, musa.org.za, a movement for exactly what Craig's been talking about now. So firstly, I want to thank you as organizers for this forum and all the participants, and particularly Craig for the comment he just made in the last few minutes. This question about all of us getting together from different faith groups with a common purpose for the benefit of humankind is fundamental to all our beliefs. Islam teaches it. Prophet Muhammad, as you've pointed out, taught it and lived it. And this is particularly important for our times and challenges we face as humanity today. I haven't had the good opportunity of reading your book, Craig, but I will do so after hearing what you've said and also the comments from the moderator and the person who's just been talking with you now. I think it's very insightful, your conversation. You will also recognize that our beliefs from Messiah Jesus, as the Quran mentions him, mentions crucially the oneness of the Creator, the originator, the loving, the merciful, the compassionate. And that oneness is fundamental to our belief systems. And it probably permeates across all beliefs in some form. The Quran simply reestablishes that concept of oneness and reconfirms the message of the Messiah, Jesus, and Moses, David, Abraham, and even like was said a minute ago, perhaps Rama, Krishna, and many other great tribal leaders and inspired leaders. So I wanted to simply say that from a South African perspective, we would like to link up with this group. I believe that most of you folks are in the Indian subcontinent, but also with you, Craig. And if I'm unable to put any message on the chat or send you my details, but if we could somehow make contact through musa.org.za, or if you could just send me an email as faisal.ketkodia as it is at gmail.com, I would appreciate linking up with you all. And the final point I wanted to put to Craig is when you talk about the Trinity, what's important to recognize in the oneness of the Creator is that we as Muslims do not take anything more than what Jesus, Moses, Abraham, and Muhammad said as fundamental. So we do not add to the message on attributes of the Creator. So while the Quran mentions the Holy Ghost or the Holy Spirit, Ruh al-Qudus, which is attributed to Jesus and only him that we know of, that the Quran mentions. And the Quran mentions Jesus as the Messiah, and the Quran does mention, obviously, the Creator. So those three are distinct, and the one that's unique and the most important is the one that Jesus worshipped and the Holy Ghost came from, and that is God Almighty and him alone. So that's the only differentiator. Other than that, I think we are in sync. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I hope we can have further discussion. Jazakallah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Faisal.
Yeah. Would you want to respond to that, Craig, or shall I take the next question?
No, I'd like to respond first, Faisal. If you want to get in touch with me, you can find how to contact me pretty easily. Just either social media or my website. There's a page on my website. It's a contact, and you can just put your email in. And I think pretty much all my social media profiles have a link to my website. So I'm happy to respond to you there. So with the Trinity, I want to make a quick point. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. Let me try to do this real quick. You see these triangles?
Yeah.
Okay, so the triangle with just God at the top is one way I kind of conceive of the Trinity. The one next to it, when you have God and Jesus on the same parallel, that's the type of Trinity that I don't believe in. but I believe on the one with just God on the top. Just kind of give you an idea of, that's my kind of understanding, you know, like the Trinity. Yes. Okay. We can believe in it. Is it the true manifestation of God? I think Faisal, you were making good points, you know, like who did Jesus worship? Pretty sure Jesus worshiped God. But I think as a scholar, like when I read the Gospels, like you see evidence for monotheism and you see evidence for Trinitarianism. When he talks about being, you know, the Son of God, like what does that mean? Like, did he literally mean the Son of God? You know, or was he referring to this idea that, you know, each and every one of us in this chat room, in a way, is a son of God because we're part of his creation? So, you know, I mean, that's where the debates lie, in my view. I need to dive into more of that, the literature on that too. So, thank you, Faisal.
We have Afsar Ali Saab raising your hands. Please go ahead, Afsar Ali Saab.
Yes, thank you very much for your enlightening presentation, Professor Considine. This is Afsar Ali from Chicago. And good morning to you, and good evening to the rest of the people, and good day. As a Muslim,
Faisal, you have to mute yourself, please. I think I'll have to mute him.
Yeah, he did it. He muted himself.
Okay, fine, fine.
Yeah, as a Muslim, I mean, I consider myself a practicing Muslim, and my understanding of Christians and the Jews is very strongly influenced by Quran 262, second chapter 62, the theme of which is again repeated in chapter 5 as well, I believe in the verses 69, that all those who attain to faith, and the Jews and the Christians, and depending on which of the two references you refer to, you know, either the Sabaean or the other one is, but the bottom line is, all those who believe in God and the hereafter, their reward rests with God, you know. And my views of Christians, and that's how I view and you. Now, that being said, I would be interested in learning from you how your view of the various books within what is considered as the canon today, by most of the Christians, like, you know, the 39 of the Old and the 27 of the New Testament. Different people view canon differently. Historically, also, you had different versions of there was differences of opinion whether something should be included in the canon or not. And particularly, for example, even as recently as 1500s, heavyweight Martin Luther didn't want the Book of James to be in the canon because he was a very faith alone kind of a guy. So he felt that Book of James asked too much of works, deeds.
Yeah.
And he said, "Hey,
like a rigid lifestyle." Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He said his comment. My understanding is, if my memory serves me correctly, was that it was written by some Jew who didn't really understand the mission of Jesus. Mm-hmm. And then he also, by the way, Book of Revelation, he wanted to toss that out as well from the canon. But in your opinion, how do you view some statements from like the Gospel of John? You know, no one shall come to the Father except through me. You know, or the only begotten Son. How do you reconcile those with your belief that you know, Muhammad was a prophet? This is another way to reach God, you know, through his teachings. How do you reconcile that? And also, how do you reconcile that? I mean, the Jesus of the Gospel of John is significantly different than the synoptic gospels. Yeah. So the three synoptic gospels, you know, Son of God. when you read Son of God in the Synoptic Gospels, you don't come away with the same understanding as you do in book of Gospel of John. How do you reconcile those? Do you consider Gospel of John still canonical in its entirety or partially? I'd love to hear from you. And I have a quick follow-up depending on your answer. Thank you.
I consider all of these, any and all text that is talking about Jesus, I consider equally valid as any other. Even things like the Synoptic and Dead Sea Scrolls, later commentary about Jesus. I take all of these things as kind of equal value. I'm not necessarily one into creating a hierarchy of, this book is more authentic than the other. Though there's been plenty of scholarship suggesting that some books are kind of more closer to the authentic truth than others. But I don't think we're ever going to learn for sure if any of these kind of ranking principles are true or not. I do believe in many ways that scripture is not too different from modern book writing as well. Like the people that were putting the Bible together, what was their purpose? I think this is a question that deserves some more attention. I will say a few things about some of the other specific biblical passages. The one that no one can get to the Father except through Jesus, saying like only through him. I believe in that, but I also don't believe it's only Jesus. The Bible verse that you're referring to also doesn't mention does Jesus have some people around him as well? Is he part of a league or a group that is responsible for judging us? Is it only him? Right. So in viewing it this way, I'm taking kind of the exclusive element out of Jesus. Jesus is still part of it. Yes. And do I believe that, maybe ultimately my own destination will have to go through Jesus? Yeah, perhaps. Yeah. But only Jesus? I don't know. The other distinction that I like to make is that there's a Jesus of Nazareth and a Jesus of Christianity. I think the Jesus of Nazareth brings us closer to these acts, the actual physical life of Jesus, the stories in the canon, the deeds. And then there's the Jesus of Christianity. And I'm not sure if one is more right than the other. They just exist. The Jesus of Christianity is closer to Luther and Paul, which, again, we're not focusing so much on law and rigid belief. It was more of I don't know necessarily how you would describe Luther and Paul. It's a faith. It's a different type of faith. But, are Luther and Paul wrong about, focusing less on practices and more about faith? I don't know. And I don't think I'll ever know. But what I try to do is take both of these narratives at kind of face value and not really get into the game of saying one is right and one is wrong. I do think, though, that the Jesus of Nazareth would be closer to the Jesus of the Quran. But, what was God's plan for Jesus? Was it just to reinstill the law? Or was God using Jesus to create a new faith, a new different type of faith? I don't know.
Yeah, a quick follow-up if I may.
Yeah, please go ahead.
The follow-up is, by the way, as far as none shall come to Father except through me. I've seen some Christians here in our interfaith dialogue argue that they contextualize it. They say, he was talking to a certain group of people. So for those people, he was saying, you will not reach God until unless you essentially follow what I am preaching.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
they
Yeah, I think I was kind
contextualize
of, I was kind of getting at that in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, you're walking along the path of some very big heavyweights, the founding fathers of this nation, Thomas Jefferson. Which becomes obvious when you read his Reading Bible, where
Yeah.
he isolated and removed all the editorialization of others and just purely picked his words. And many of the other founding fathers, they had very similar beliefs that you seem to have. That while they grew up in an Orthodox Christian environment, they firmly believed in what eventually, after doing their own due diligence, exactly what you are talking about. Jesus was a great prophet, and not the same as God. But anyway, my follow-up question is, being at Rice, which is a very prestigious university, do you teach this particular, what your presentation was today as part of some course, and how popular has your, if there is a course like that, how popular is it?
I think the closest course to the nature of this talk today is my Muslims in American Society course. That's my #1 go-to course since I've been at Rice, and I've been here for 6 years. And the overarching themes of that course, let's say, pluralism, anti-racism, civic nation building, cross-cultural navigation, knowledge, women's rights, and, peace and goodwill, are the underlying themes throughout the course, but we just focus specifically on the American context as much as possible. But obviously, because America has always been connected and intertwined with the so-called Muslim world, I'm able to talk about the Islamic tradition and the Prophet Muhammad and Islamic history, while also teaching them about American history and American society. I do not teach a specific class on Prophet Muhammad, and I'm in a bit of a bind because I'm a sociologist and I've had a bit of an unconventional journey. I don't have a degree in any religious study. I have it in politics, international relations, and sociology. And, I don't have a degree in, quote, Islamic studies. So being a sociologist teaching religion in a sociology department puts me in a kind of unique place. There's not a lot of high reception for religion at Rice, especially because I'm not in the religious studies department. I also teach a class on race and ethnic relations. I teach a class called social problems. But I think in the future, if I ever moved on from Rice, I think an Islamic studies department or a Christian Muslim studies department would probably see some value in my work, more so than sociologists. The other thing I wanted to add, Afsar, about your point about the founding fathers, a very enigmatic group of individuals. And yeah, Jefferson's Bible, like he basically tore out all of these like hyper divine passages and miracles. He took all of these elements of Jesus's life out to kind of bring it back almost to the Jerusalem church, to James, like more rational. Jesus was a great man. He was a prophet, but he wasn't divine. He was not God. So interesting little tidbit of, connection between American identity and Islamic identity there. Jefferson was, he also owned a Quran, as I'm sure you knew.
Yeah, he was very strongly influenced by John Locke. John Locke was accused by many of his contemporaries of being, I think, getting his theology from the Mohammedan Bible. He was referring to the Quran.
I wrote about this in Islam in America, Exploring the Issues, the book that came out in 2019. But when Jefferson was running for president in the early 1800s, he was actually accused of being a secret Muslim in a media narrative that is actually not too different from what we see today. I mean, people say that about me all the time, that I'm a secret Muslim. And that I have some alternative motive here to convert all the Christians to Islam. Jefferson was dealing with the same thing because people knew at the time that he was a scholar of all of these religions, and he had no real issue looking at a religious tradition and saying, hey, that's a good idea. Jefferson was interested in the Sharia more than anything, I think. He wanted to understand how a so-called Muslim majority government operated at a political and legal level, and I think at the time he was associating probably Islam with the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire at the time was one of the most powerful entities in the world. So Jefferson was probably impressed by how the Ottomans were able to pull off what they were able to pull off in terms of maintaining this pretty expansive geographical empire.
And in fact, I think Jefferson may also have been influenced by Spinoza's idea of God, right? Spinoza's idea is also very significant in this context. He didn't believe in the Christian idea of God. So not that he was an atheist, but he believed in a God. But that, I think, it would be interesting to study Spinoza's ideas also on
I'll have
God.
to look into that. Yeah.
Yes. So
I'm familiar with Spinoza, but I've never really dove deep.
No, you must read that. Spinoza has some fantastic ideas on God, and in fact, I was very impressed with it when I read it. And I think now we have another question from Dr. Kamran Khan. Dr. Kamran, please go ahead. You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Good evening, Craig.
Good evening.
First, congratulate you on your intellectual honesty, your compassion, and which you have in your book.
Your voice is breaking, Doctor. We can't hear you properly.
Is it better now? Can you hear better now?
I don't know.
Is it better?
Craig, can you hear? I don't know. I can't hear.
I think it's better now. It was just it was choppy. I think it was like a connection.
Yeah.
Is it better now?
Yeah. It's now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. It's fine
definitely,
now.
definitely.
Yes, Craig, I'll just repeat. Let me congratulate you on your intellectual honesty, your compassion, and the reason with which you have written this book. I think this is what is required more than a degree in religious studies to rediscover who was Muhammad and who was Jesus. You see what happens, these are probably the two most venerated people in human history. And when people are venerated, they are lost in the mass of veneration. So you either have one side which exaggerates their characteristics or another side which degenerates them. So I have two questions for you. One is that was Jesus Christ called by the name Jesus Christ in his life? And because as far as my studies go, the word Christian was used in about 50 AD for the followers of Jesus Christ. And the second question which I will ask you is, if you are aware of the verse in the Quran, chapter number 61, verse number 14, where God commands the Muslims to be helpers of God, just like the followers of Jesus Christ. Let me put it in the correct word. Be helpers of God, just as Jesus, the son of Mary, said to his white-garbed ones that you be helpers of God. The word in the Quran for the Christians is Nasara, means helpers of God. The word Christian is not used. And a lot of Islamic writing, religious writing, is silent on what Prophet Muhammad thought or said or recorded about the followers of Jesus Christ. I believe it's not possible that after reading this verse or in his time, the Prophet must not have said something or recorded something about the followers of Jesus Christ. Have you come across in your writing anything about Muhammad's elaboration of the followers of Jesus Christ? And could this be
Hello, we have lost you.
Kamran, you still there?
Yeah, I think we have lost Kamran. I
Right.
think he's referring to the verse in Surah Saf.
Kamran, are you there?
Yeah, I think we have lost
Well,
his
when
connection.
he comes back, I can go back to it. I've taken notes, so I can go back to
Yeah,
it.
yeah. So in the meantime,
Yes.
somebody else can ask the question.
Surah Saf.
Yeah, Surah, I think Dr. Kamran, you're back. Dr. Kamran, I think we can't hear you. Okay, we can take another question. I think Craig will answer you when you're back. I think Fazil, you already, I think we'll give a chance to another person before we come back to you. Is there anybody else who would like to ask a question? They can just raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask.
Mr. Zafrullah Khan is raised his hand.
He has a raised, I have not seen it.
Yeah, Mr. Zafrullah Khan.
No, I don't see a hand raised there.
Yeah,
Zafrullah,
his hand is raised. His hand is raised. I can see it.
I cannot see it. Anyway, go ahead, Zafrullah bhai, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Dr. Craig. It was an excellent talk.
Thank you.
Now, my question is, in the Quran is very specific about Mary. I think there is a chapter dedicated to Mary. And it talks very highly of Jesus Christ. Despite that, where exactly and when and how did the concept of Muhammad being Antichrist develop in the Christian thought? And what was the basis of this kind of thinking at the very early years of Islam?
It's a really good question, and I've had a few run-ins in reading and writing and researching, and I think the most impactful narrative coming out of the kind of Christian world was John of Damascus in 640, and it was not a favorable impression of Muhammad, basically calling him a false prophet, and that he had chanced upon Christianity. Basically, he appropriated Christianity and basically stole the ideas and created this this false religion. But put it this way, Zafrullah, did John of Damascus ever meet Muhammad? Did John of Damascus, did he have any interactions with Muslims? How did John of Damascus get the information that he had about Muhammad? You know, it's one of those things that goes back to the point I made earlier. 57% of Americans don't like Muslims. 78% have never met one. How do we know that John Damascus had a significant and credible body of knowledge or data on Muhammad? So I think John of Damascus was playing the political game. Islam was an emerging power in the region. John of Damascus was in a position of power within the Christian church. What do politicians do? They try to divide and conquer. They try to get people to come over to their tribe. And I think it was basic slander. I think what John of Damascus was doing, it was speaking completely out of hand for the simple purpose of denigrating someone, so that the emerging Islamic empire would not gain more steam or gain more converts or whatever you want to call it. So there are some early, Christian thinkers. I mean, not early, we're talking 7th century, who, put out this material. I mean, that's one of the earliest ones, but let me also say, like, if you go through history, I mean, it's kind of never ending. It's kind of a continuation of denigrating Muhammad, like Dante's Inferno. I don't know if you've ever heard about the verse Dante, which is just like, I mean, talk about like visually displeasing. I mean, talking awful things.
Levels of hell there,
yeah. I mean, just, Martin Luther was also not speaking very favorably. Voltaire, I think, had some, very sensational depictions. He had a play, I believe, that I've written about in a previous book. And you know, in the current manifestation, it's also, you know, we see it in Charlie Hebdo, we see it in all these Draw Muhammad Day cartoons, and these are the individuals who, it really makes you wonder where they get their information from. I mean, it can't be Muslims, you know, like what Muslim on earth would ever say that Muhammad is in the hellfire? It just doesn't happen.
Okay,
Thank you.
Dr. Kamran, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. I hope
Okay.
I
Okay,
hope you
so-
can hear me better now. Yeah.
Yes, you can hear you better now. Yes.
Craig, I'll just repeat what I said. I congratulate you on your scholarship. You heard that?
I took notes,
Okay.
Kamran.
we
Yeah,
have
I took
heard
notes.
that. Yeah.
Did you get my question?
Yes, of course, we got it.
Yeah,
No,
I mean, I
we're
think-
actually waiting for you to come back.
Oh, sorry.
You had lost your connection, right? That's why.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so it was about the Nasara verse, right? And this idea of Christians being helpers. You know, in my new book, The People of the Book, I also extend the notion and the concept of believers into the realm of Christianity and even Jews and all members of the Ummah. You know, like when I think of Muhammad, and when Muhammad thinks of a believer, you know, what was he referring to? Like, could Christians be a believer without recognizing the authority of Muhammad? Could a Christian be a believer without recognizing Muhammad as a prophet? And I tend to believe that when we do think about this concept of a believer, I think a non-Muslim can be a believer in Islam, in the vision of Muhammad. I think the Oz, some of the tribes that Muhammad was engaging with in Medina, I mean, they believed in him to some degree, right? It's just a matter of whether you extend the agreement. Does it have to be purely theological? When we talk about the definition of a believer, is this a believer in the nitty-gritty theology, or is this a believer in Muhammad as a prophet of God? So, I mean, I kind of play around in a way that with a term as the Quran does with helpers in Maysara.
Yeah. No, the word there is Nahnu Ansarullah. So the Nahnu Ansarullah, when Jesus asks, who will be my supporters? Ansar means one who helps, helper.
Right.
And the disciples said, Nahnu Ansarullah. So they're not calling themselves Nasara. They're saying that we will be your supporters in the cause. So the belief, when you said, Craig, is belief not in the nitty-gritty theology, as you rightly said, belief in a cause which the prophet stood for, the belief in what Jesus stood for. Right, so it's more than theology. It is the reformative cause, you know, the reformative principle, the mission that they were engaged in. Believe in that mission to bring about change. Because how do we change? You said you have to uplift ourselves in our humanity. That's the phrase you use in your book, right? So how do we uplift ourselves? So I think that's what belief stood for, in my opinion. I don't know if you agree with me there.
I mean, I do. Yeah. I mean, you know, generally, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I mean, people often ask me, like, well, if you have so much like belief in Muhammad, then why aren't you Muslim?
Converting. Yeah.
You know, I mean, yeah, I mean, outside of that, but like, you know, I don't think we need to see it in these rigid terms. You know,
Yes.
like I think it's healthy for a Christian person to at least believe in elements of Muhammad or Islam. Yeah. You know, when people ask me, well, do you believe in Islam? I ask, well, what is Islam to you? I mean, I might believe in it. Like, it depends on how you define it.
Exactly.
I mean, if Islam is about monotheism, belief in prophets, the day of judgment, compassion, mercy, peace, yes, I believe in those things. But for me, things that may separate me, like, I wouldn't necessarily think of Muhammad as the final prophet. I think my understanding of God is infinite and eternal, and I think there may be more prophets to come. That's just my belief. That's how I rationally kind of make sense of that. But, aside from these, really nitty gritty conversations that like make people pick a side, you have to choose a box, you have to click that category in order for us to understand you. Like, it doesn't need to be that black and white.
Interesting. Absolutely. Interesting answer, Craig. We have,
Do we have
Aslam Baba
Dr.
raising.
Victor Edwin. I believe we've talked before.
Dr. Victor Edwin is from Bombay or Delhi. He runs this interfaith group there. Victor Edwin, would you like to come in?
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening to you. Good evening, sir. My name is Victor Edwin. I teach Islam, Christian, Muslim relations at Vidya Jyoti College, a Jesuit faculty in Delhi. I bought the book of Craig.
Wow.
Yes.
When did you buy that?
A friend of mine bought and sent me.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
Recently.
Yeah.
Great.
Yes. So a few days ago I got, and thank you very much for this book. It's see, for me, the important element for Christian-Muslim relations is described in the Vatican Council's Nostra Aetate, where we need to move from the past of hostility to a future of mutual respect and generosity. Forgetting the past doesn't mean that forgetting the past. Forgetting the hostility of the past and moving to a new era of deep understanding and mutual respect. So from that perspective, this book makes tremendous sense, because as we read in the history over the centuries in the Western scholarship, especially the Byzantine scholarship, those who lived in the Arab, they were very careful about what to articulate about Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam. But those who lived in the Byzantine, they have their articulation of Prophet Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, is not very denigrating and disrespectful. That has an impact over the centuries. So people, Christians, have learned to respect Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam. So that way, there's a very important contribution. But one thing, a very important question that I would like to ask is, see, I have been teaching Islam, Christian, Muslim relations for 25 years. Sorry, 10, 15 years now. The students always ask me, see, I over the years, I have attended a number of Miladun Nabi celebrations, memorized the poem Naat Khani, they call it, Naat Khani, singing the praises of Muhammad. I have memorized when I was a student at Aligarh Muslim University, later in Jamia Millia Islamia also. So even sometime I even chaired the session of Miladun Nabi session. So over the years, I have grown for a deep respect for Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, because my Muslim brothers and sisters have, for them, he is the one who lived out the message of Quran in his life. So he's very important. So I have grown in respect. The question I'm being asked, somehow there I think we differ in our understanding. See, they asked me, do you accept Muhammad as your prophet? As a Christian, do you accept Muhammad? Muslims also ask, but in a different way. See, we respect Jesus as our prophet. Why don't you respect Muhammad as our prophet? That's the Christian way. The Muslim brothers and sisters ask me all the time. Whereas the Christian students of theology ask me, do you speak with much respect for the prophet? Do you consider him or accept him as a prophet of you, a Christian? I think there I have to be, I reflect a lot, and I see, as a Christian, I cannot accept Muhammad as my prophet because it has consequences. Also, to be authentic, if I say yes, that needs a lot of authenticity, the consequences. One is, if I accept Muhammad as a prophet, I must also accept the Holy Quran as the final word of God. That's what you have perfected the religion. So if I accept the Holy Quran as the final word of God, what is at the kernel of Christian faith? Incarnation, redemption, Trinity, divinity of Christ, all those I have to deny. So I cannot be sincerely saying that Muhammad is my prophet and continue to be a Christian. So I must accept the Holy Quran as the final word of God. So I must become a Muslim. So here I very sincerely, whether Christians or Muslim friends, I say I have deep respect for the Prophet of Islam, but I do not consider him as my own prophet. To the Muslim brothers and say, see, accepting Jesus as your prophet is within, because the Holy Quran calls him as a prophet, the penultimate prophet. Before Jesus, he comes as the penultimate prophet. And in the Hadith, lots of Sufi literature, deep respect is shown. So you are within your Islamic tradition to call him prophet. But I don't have that luxury to call him a prophet and remain a Christian. So this is a theologically very sensitive, important point to be an authentic Christian, at the same time authentically involved in Christian-Muslim relations. But I think you differed in saying that I accept him as a prophet. So we differ. I respect your view. I respect your view fully, and we differ. So maybe you could say a few words about it. Connected with this, one more question is, we talked about the Jewish Christians and their understanding of Jesus. I think Hans Kung also held that type of idea. He has articulated it. But if you see Gavin DeCosta, who teaches in the UK, he has a long essay finding how this doesn't fit into the Christian understanding, considering him as a Jewish prophet. Theologically, I think the important thing is the cross of Christ will not be given enough attention if the Jewish Christian, that type of prophet, that type of understanding. Because the Paschal mystery of Christ, passion, death, and resurrection, is something at the heart of Christian faith. That is not being given attention to. So these are my just reflections. If you have some...
No, we respect your honesty.
Yeah, I'll try to respond
Yeah.
to this, and I'll try to thank you for all that, by the way, and thank you for their service, 25 years. That's
sorry,
amazing.
Not 25 years. Yeah, I have been teaching maybe 12 to 13 years, not 25 years. Thank you. I should correct it.
Well, still, but that's amazing. Yeah, thanks for the commitment. So a few thoughts I wrote down. I mean, just going to throw out a hypothetical situation. Like, could a Christian believe that Jesus is God and Muhammad is a prophet at the same time, while also not necessarily believing everything that Muhammad was saying? Are these things possible? Because essentially, Muhammad is basically identifying himself with a sect of Christianity that lost out. In some ways, that's what he's doing. And I was kind of referring to this earlier, and I definitely connect with the mystery of Christ. That is something that resonates with me deeply. And I think it's an important part of faith and belief. And I apply that mystery to even something like the Trinity. And Muhammad was condemning the Trinity. Was the Trinity the true purpose of Jesus's mission here on earth, to kind of instill this in us? I don't know. Was it more Unitarian? I also don't know. I mean, there's elements of both of these kind of traditions that I think are realistic and also important to me. So when I say Muhammad is a prophet, even though Muhammad was saying Jesus wasn't God, that still doesn't take away my belief that Jesus is God. That's how I see it. I'd also like to comment on how, Brother Victor, you were talking about Muslims in your life kind of showing you who Muhammad was through their actions. And that's one of the reasons why I view him as a prophet, you know, kind of understanding that prophet does not necessarily have to be so tied to theological claims, that prophethood can also be based in how one lives their life and exhibiting their character and conduct. And like learning about Jesus, not necessarily through the lens of these councils, but going back to a more authentic version of the gospel and focusing on acts, helping the poor, uplifting those that have been downtrodden. And then the third point, Brother Victor, that you mentioned was at the very beginning, you were mentioning like how important it is to forget the hostilities, you know, like how often do we as human beings always focus on the things that divide us, you know, as people of conscious, as thinking people, you know, we really do have an option of what we want to focus on. Do you want to focus on things that divide, or do you want to find inspiration in moments in time that can build the bridges? So part of the mission of this book that I wrote is to give these examples, to kind of provide a hope, a platform, and say, hey, it's been done before. It's not too dissimilar to now, and we can actually kind of move on in a constructive manner. So I covered a lot there, Brother Victor, and I hope I articulated myself well at the beginning with how I distinguish these features. It's very personal to me, and to be honest, I don't think I've met another person that has these beliefs, though I would hope that some people would at least be able to rationalize with me there.
Yeah, in this context, Craig, please allow me to mention from your book. You mention Frederick Denny, right, who speaks about an idea called super tribe. Super tribe of monotheists, of there's Jews, Christians, and Muslims, you know. So I think you already have another person there in the form of Frederick Denny, and I'm sure there are many such people. What would you say to that? Or maybe can you elaborate on that, the idea of a super tribe?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense for Jews, Christians, and Muslims to think of themselves as a supra religion. I think it helps. You know, we always get so caught up in like different sects of Christianity or sects of Islam. So Sunni, Shia, whatever it might be. And then in the Christian tradition, you have so many different sects. But like, what if we, perhaps this isn't the greatest analogy, but like, what if we looked at the monotheistic tradition as having sects in itself? Like Judaism is a sect of the Abrahamic faith, and so on with Christianity and Islam. I mean, that doesn't erase the inevitable divisions that will come up, but I do think it pushes us further towards unity, actually saying that, you know, fundamentally, the number one thing that we all really have in common is monotheism. Even though the argument from some Muslims, and I get this a lot, they call me a believer, a pagan, that I believe in three gods because I recognize the Trinity as a part of my religious experience. I don't know of one Christian, and Brother Victor, maybe you can correct me, but have you ever met a Christian that believes in three gods? You won't find a Christian saying things like that. I mean, the Trinity is oneness, three manifestations within one. It all goes back to the oneness. So I think this idea of people of the book, of Abrahamic traditions, is a step forward in the right direction. And that's why I advocate for the Judeo-Christian tradition, making a little bit more room within its space for the Islamic tradition. I think it makes sense. I also wanted to add one thing, and this is kind of off subject too. I mean, maybe we can have a conversation about it, but like, does a prophet have to be flawless? Like, what if, hypothetically speaking, like, what if Muhammad was wrong about the Trinity? What if the Trinity was really God's appropriate manifestation? Do you have to believe in every single thing a person does or says for you to consider them a prophet? It's just another question that floats in my head.
Yeah, fair enough. But actually, the theologically speaking, Craig, insofar as Trinity is concerned, I mean, what boggles the mind is the idea of the hypostatic union. The triune God, the idea of triunity, and the hypostatic, the co-substantialism, that is there. So these are the things, which are, I mean, these terms, are normally no Christian would have heard of what I just spoke. Co-substantial, hypostatic union, triunity, triune God. Normal Christians don't hear about this. But then these are all deep theological matters, which we should go beyond that. And as you rightly put it, the whole idea of any prophet was reform, was liberation. Their missions were liberatory. Their missions were more liberatory than theological. I don't think, I mean, any prophet came to promote theology, because God doesn't need you. You may need God, but God doesn't need you. So in that sense, all prophetic missions were liberatory, reformatory. The teachings were reformatory. So in that sense, we all are one. All humanity is one insofar as the liberatory aspect of a theology is concerned, the liberation theology. We work for humanitarian, for the human cause. I think that's what must unite us to go beyond whether it is Trinity or anything else. I think that's what I would urge, Brother Victor Edwin to reflect on. And as
I will say this too. Like I think a lot of Christians haven't reflected a lot on the Trinity. It's kind of just taken as fact. Like I don't remember ever really deeply getting into it. But one thing that I'd like to share really quick before we move on. I was reading recently a book about St. Clare, who was one of the students of St. Francis back in the 13th century. And the way that this book on St. Clare described the oneness of the Trinity, I mean, if you think of it as one line, this is one object here. God is at the top. God is the giver. Jesus is down the line. Jesus shares, and then Jesus takes, and then the Spirit shares. But it's all one process, and it's still a form of oneness. But anyways, we could talk and deliberate all day on Christ.
And you were also right earlier about the Son of God, because Jesus also says, "For all those who are led by the Spirit of God are the sons of God." Jesus quotes the Psalms there, right? When he was asked, "You being a man, you maketh yourself a God," and Jesus asked the question, "Is it not in your law, written in your law, that you are gods?" So he was quoting the 82nd Psalm, if I'm not wrong, where it is said that all those who are led by the Spirit of God are the sons of God. So in that sense, we all those who are godly people are sons of God. In that sense, we are all. When you call Edwin your brother, of course you're not talking about real brothers. This is the brotherhood of humanity. So in that sense, we all are sons of God, with sons of the same Creator, or the creations of the same Creator. So I think that is how we need to go beyond this theology into metaphysics and the metaphorical realities of religion, or the metaphorical importance of some of these ideas must be looked into, and that's where unity can be found, in my opinion. And I think Aslam Bawa has been waiting for some time. Please go ahead, Aslam Bawa, to ask a question. After that, we have Ashfaq. I think he can ask a question. Aslam Bawa, please unmute yourself. And kindly, please introduce yourself.
Yes, Craig, I'm from South Africa. And I'm firstly would like to say thank you very much for this platform that you have created, both of you and your organization. I follow you on Twitter, Craig, and I'm very impressed with what you provide there. But what I want to discuss is, and I think a point that you touched on, is the issue of universality. And just from a linguistic perspective, perhaps to look at some of these aspects. And this is what I find perhaps particularly appealing about Islam, is that the name itself, Islam, is not linked to a person, place, or thing. So it contains within its name a philosophy, and that is the submission to the will of God. And no other religion in the world has that. And that's why when you touched on the aspect of universality and going towards God, for example, Christianity, without seeking to denigrate or without seeking to create a comparative basis, but simply to elaborate through a linguistic perspective the universality of the term Islam and Muslim. Islam is submission to the will of God, and Muslim is one who submits. Now, that is an element that has found tremendous favor, not only in the name, but also that it comes through the Quran. That name is given in the Quran. This day have I chosen your faith for you, and I've called it Islam. Now, if you take any other religion, it follows a name of a person, a place, or a thing. So you can look at Buddhism, you can look at Christianity, you can look at Zoroastrianism, you can look at Taoism, you can look at Hinduism. Any of these have got a link to a human form of existence that has allowed a presentation of a name through such an aspect, a material aspect, except Islam. So taking this in terms of the universality, I find that the Islamic concept is one that can easily be adopted throughout, because it is ultimately the submission to the will of God. And what I liked about what you said was, do I then go into the nitty-gritty? For example, do I go into the fiqh or the sharia and say I need to accept all of those propositions? And the idea is obviously to start from the premise of saying that I look at this in terms of submission to the will of God, like Jesus did, like Moses did, like Abraham did. So to find the brotherhood and the universality, because indeed, all of them said, we are Muslim. And why when they said we are Muslim, it's not an ethnic, it's not a historical element. It is a philosophical element saying submission to the will of God. And that is where it comes from. So I just wanted your thoughts on that.
First, thank you for your kind words. And second, these are questions that I think about a lot. And I agree with the general spirit in which you're approaching this issue. I often think, what is Islam doing the same for Christianity? What is that? What is the will of God? What does that look like? How does that operate in society? And what does it mean to submit to God's will? And I do think the questions of the rituals and the practices are part of the discussion here. If a individual defines Islam in terms of more kind of elementary principles, like almost like a checkbox, like halal food, boom, no drinking of alcohol, boom. And if this is a person's definition of Islam, and if that's their definition of the will of God, and if that's how they understand the submission to God, then that's fair. But that makes me a non-Muslim. That does not make me a believer. But if we're going to play around with words and think big picture, what is God? Who is God? God is the creator of all of us. He created us, as the Quran says, into nations and tribes so that we can get to know one another. What does it mean to submit to God's will? Is God's will anti-racism? Is God's will for us to believe in racial equality, for us to be good neighbors and to be compassionate and peaceful? If that is what it means to submit to God, then I would fit into this bigger philosophical understanding of, what it means to be a Muslim. And when people say, even something quite, and you mentioned this, people saying, we are a Christian saying, well, we are Muslims, and Muslims saying we are Christians. I mean, that's the type of spirit connection I think that is really valuable for us. Like all of us. There are some Muslims that happen to be my friends, and I'm like, they're definitely Christians. They don't have to believe that Jesus is the Son of God. They don't have to practice like I practice, but I know that they're a Christian deep down. And I see that in my Muslim friends. I consider them to be Christians, and I take it as a compliment when someone who knows me would say something, well, like, he's in essence a Muslim. I mean, I'm okay with that. Again, but it all goes back to the big picture. How do we define these big terms? Submission to God, God's will, and Islam. I think generally speaking, I'm definitely with you in terms of almost like a metaphysical understanding of these categories here.
If I may add a little bit to that, Craig, I would entirely agree with your idea of religion itself. You know, I have no hesitation in agreeing with you. It's a larger picture which we have to look at. But that's why I may have to disagree with the definition put forth by Aslam Baba of submission. See, if you understand Islam as submission to God, as most understand, certainly a person has a right to believe in such a notion. I have no question with that. But is that what Islam signifies? Is that what the Quran signifies? If you read the Quran itself, in several places the Quran talks about, force. It says Islam cannot be forced down people's throat. La ikraha fi din is a fundamental doctrine of the Quran. So therefore, when you want to make people submit to God, and that will militate against this teaching of La ikraha fi din, let there be no compulsion in deen. Because submission is an aspect of surrender. A surrender is an aspect of force. Nobody willingly surrenders. Nobody willingly submits. And God in the Quran tells you there's no compulsion in it. God doesn't force you to believe in any concept or God himself. So therefore, the idea of Islam as submission will militate against the concept of La ikraha fi din in the Quran. So what will be the better definition of Islam then? The better definition of Islam would be what you just said, peace. The fundamental meaning of the word Islam is peace. Submission comes second. So therefore, any person who stands for peace is a Muslim. As simple as that. Any person who stands for harmony, any person who stands for interfaith harmony, any person who stands for anti-racism, not just not being racist, you know, anti-racist, any person who stands for those universal values propounded by the Quran peacefully has to be a Muslim, whether he's Craig Considine or Aslam Baba or Faizur Rahman, right? So I think that is how I would understand that. It will expand the definition of Islam and it will be more inclusive.
I mean, and I would also use exactly what you just said and say, like, that's how I would define a Christian, because that's my understanding of Jesus's life too. You know, like you don't have to read the Bible. Yes. You don't have to pray as all Christians pray to believe in Jesus. I don't think so.
I think this is exactly what the Prophet Muhammad said when he said all prophets are brothers. So they fundamentally preach the same message. So therefore, whatever I said, what it just applies to all prophets, whether it's Jesus, Moses, or any prophet, right? It should equally apply to all religions also in that sense. So that is the only way we can become exclusive. When we say submission, then the question will come, submission to whom and which God? Because even within Islam, the Sunnis have an idea of God, the Shias have an idea of God, the Barelvis have an idea of God, the Deobandis have, the Salafis have. They all say that unless you follow this, you're not a Muslim. The concept of takfir is so rampant across sects, you know, in Islam. So each sect considers the other as kafir. Most of if you look at some of their publication, that's what that's the impression you get. So we have to universalize religion. That's the only way you can unite humanity. That's my take on that. And then I think there's another person who's been waiting for some time. We'll take his question. Ashfaq, can you please unmute yourself, Ashfaq, and ask.
Hello.
And please introduce yourself again.
Hello, I'm Dr. Ashfaq Ubare from Bombay.
Okay.
Thank you, Craig. And thank you, the Forum, for the promotion of moderate thought for a very informative session.
Thank you so much.
I think what is separating humans in the name of religion is the concept of religion as a noun. When you take Islam as a noun, Christianity as a noun, Judaism as a noun, Hinduism as a noun, this is what is separating people. And as I understand it, a Muslim is someone who submits to the will of God. I will disagree with the moderator, what you just said just now. I believe Muslim is someone who submits to the will of God. But when I say this, when I refer to the Quran, in the Quran I find Ibrahim alayhi salam praying to Allah, and he praying to Allah to make him and his progeny as Muslims. And when I refer to the Quran, I come across Allah calling the followers of Jesus as Muslims. So for me, Muslim is a verb, a person who submits to the will of God, follows whatever God has transmitted to us through the various prophets. A person who does this is a Muslim. So being a Muslim is an active thing. It's a verb rather than a noun.
Okay. I mean,
That's a
that's
good
a
point.
comment, basically you're making a comment, right?
Yeah, thank you for that. I agree. I mean, that's going back to my comparison with Jesus of Nazareth versus Jesus of Christianity. You know, Jesus of Nazareth was one that we can take inspiration from because he was active himself. You know, his mission was emboldened by goodness and making a difference in everyday people's lives. And certainly, I think many people would say, well, that he was doing so because of certain overarching claims, which is legitimate. But when we start focusing so much on, you know, what is truth and things, I think we get into this darker realm of a noun, and the noun is more kind of transfixed and more categorical. And it's funny you said verb, because I wrote down, well, if it's not a noun, then what is it? Like, could Islam be an adjective? It probably could be as well. But I think I like the verb because it's active. Thank you for that, Ashfaq. I might have to borrow that.
Thank you, Craig.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is there any other person who would like to ask a question?
Yes. My name is Muhammad Hanif. I'm from Chennai. Thank you,
Yes,
Brother Craig, for your very informative lecture. I would like to mention to your doubt which you just mentioned, that what if Muhammad could have been wrong? So I come to that. I refer to Quran only. There Allah Ta'ala says, وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ, which translates, you know the translation well, but for your convenience, I would say that Muhammad doesn't talk out of his own will, but what he says is what has been sent down to him. So if the innocence of the Prophet Muhammad is fundamental to the the belief in Islam, and it's not only for Muhammad, but it's true for all the prophets. We believe in the innocence of all the prophets because for the simple logic that if they keep forgetting it, if they get something wrong, they could be wrong in so many other things. Then how do we believe it? So there's no question of any prophet being wrong, because otherwise he wouldn't be a prophet at all. So anyway, that was my take. And you are going the right direction when you said about interaction and engaging with each other. That's something very good vis-a-vis the concept of clash of civilization as put forward by so many other people. We need to come together, understand each other, interact with each other, and believe in the universal brotherhood. Thank you very much, Brother Craig.
Yeah,
Thank you,
Anil
Mohammed,
for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, interesting points, and like they're well taken, and they're definitely complicated, and they're questions or points that I've been thinking about as well. Looking at this idea of whether someone like either Jesus or Paul or James, like whether their perspective and their interpretation was perhaps wrong. And I extend that same type of questioning to Muhammad, just naturally. And I really hope it's not offensive. I do think a lot of people would be offended by that, but I don't think this is the type of crowd. But how can we be so sure that everything that Muhammad was given was a revelation versus when all of us are at home, and like we have that inner voice, that kind of transcendental experience where we feel like God is talking to us. I think we all have these moments. Are those revelations or something else? And like, could Muhammad have had an interaction like this that may not have been a revelation, but something else? I mean, I'm not raising this to discredit Muhammad. I'm raising it to just show that, you know, conversations that territory can be very lot away, because it's for me, it's hard to really say that this is the truth. I claim other truths, but when we get into the theological dilemmas, I like to ask questions rather than come up with answers.
Understand. Anyone else?
Thank you, Mohammed.
Yeah. Craig, I think you can go on for some time, or I don't know how are you placed for time? We have crossed.
It's been two and a half hours.
Almost
and,
2.5 hours. So
yeah, maybe one more question, or I mean, I think we got a lot in too. So which is
yes,
good.
we got a lot of questions, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion too.
I did very much so. And honestly, thank each and every one of you for the really thoughtful insight and feedback. And I'm glad that we didn't have a echo chamber. You know, it's really easy for people these days to get into their echo chambers and not challenge each other's ideas. And I really appreciate and I welcome and I'm enriched by honest conversations where we can, you know, behave like civil adults and deal with these complicated matters in an intellectual way. So I appreciate each and every one of you.
In fact, we look forward to doing another session with you once your other book is published.
Yeah, so it should be out in May, and I think in a week or two I'll be making a notice on my social media, because Oxford will be releasing their book catalog for the fall.
Okay.
So
wonderful.
I'm excited about that. Yeah.
I wish you all the best with the book. So we can just take one more question, if you, and then we can perhaps end it. If anybody has a question, maybe they can raise their hands or unmute and ask.
We got one more here. Yeah.
Yeah, somebody, Arul Raja is, I think, raising his hand.
Yeah, I think he'll give a chance to a person who has not asked. I think that's Father Arul Raja, my friend. He runs this interfaith center at one of the most prestigious colleges in India, Loyola College. He's a very good friend. Please go ahead, Father Arul Raja.
Craig, I am a Jesuit from Chennai. I'm happy to listen to you. I'm very happy to listen to you. I vibrate with you. I learned from you this question of engaged Islam, engaged Christianity is more people friendly rather than dogmatic Islam, dogmatic Christianity. And your approach, even as a social scientist, to move into the religious studies is quite a commendable factor. Quite spontaneously, you land up in the interdisciplinary approach and so on. What I learned from you is the celebration of diversity as the major criterion for celebrating life, celebrating religious experience, and rootedness in egalitarianism in every situation, be it the gender justice or be it the racism, interaction between racism and so on, especially in the context of our Indian culture of fragmentation today. And also open-ended critical historical consciousness, though you didn't expand much on the knowledge side of your book. I could smell the flavor of your book, though I have not browsed through your book, which I'm looking forward to. And I'll be happy to review a book also. And also the compassionate justice related to the monotheistic God. Compassionate justice related to the monotheistic God. Compassionate justice. And I think I learned from you these two dimensions. Any particularism which a ghettoization is going to be detrimental to the self as well as the other. And any universalism which is having the agenda of expansionism with the political power, which is going to have certain detrimental effect on both on the self as well as the other. We need both in historical Jesus as well as the Christ of faith, as well as interpreting the Quran from the hermeneutical point of view. We need liberative particularism, liberative universalism, and we need certain liberative hermeneutical locations. And if at all, anyone who interprets the Bible or anyone who interprets Quran, anyone who interprets Ramayana, Mahabharata, Upanishads or no, should come out from what location I'm interpreting, with what political intention I'm interpreting. That has to be explicitly stated. And that could be the saving feature for all of us.
So that is why I'm just triggered with your reflections. Thank you very much for your interventions as well as sharing. I'm looking forward to your book, and I like to go through line by line.
Thank you so much, Brother Arul. Thank you so much. So good to meet you. I was educated in my youth by the Jesuits, and Brother Edwin, you're Jesuit as well. So
we all work together here, Craig.
Yes, that's amazing. I'd really like to stay in touch because I must say in my own work, it's much easier for me actually to make these connections of brotherhood and humanity with Muslims because of the nature of my work. It's actually quite difficult to run across and be with Christians who are at least operating in similar spaces. So Brother Arul, I'll say this. I think you make a really good point. The celebration of diversity and the compassionate justice. If we do both of these things, celebrate diversity and have a compassionate justice, is that not in itself a religious act, actually performing it, right? It's a form of worship. To me, that is a form of worship because God is our creator, God created diversity, and God is the ultimate judge and he is compassionate. So when we implement these things in our life, it not only makes sense in terms of our higher calling and our actual theology and our understanding of God, but it also has practical implementations too, because we know that society needs these things. And I refer to it as common sense. That's a big phrase that's used in America, you know, let's have common sense. We shouldn't have taxation without representation. I think celebrating diversity and having a compassionate justice is a form of common sense. We actually need it. We need to move beyond thinking that this is some kind of, you know, kumbaya thing that will never be achieved. We have to have a complete switch of our mindset and actually look at these things as requisites and necessities.
Absolutely. I think that brings us to the end of our discussion. I think we have gone beyond 2.5 hours, and that has been a wonderful discussion. Craig, you could have seen the interest. You know, we still have almost all the participants there in the discussion, and they are there, and they hardly left. And those who left, they rejoined again after some time. You know, that was the level of interest in this discussion. I'm really thankful to you. I mean, for taking your time out, so much of your time. I know you teach there at the Rice University. You must be very busy, and still you gave us a lot of time. I really appreciate you for that. And more than that,
I thank you. Yeah, I thank you. It's great to connect with so many people from around the world who I really don't get to see, you know, in person. I guess this is the new kind of in person, but
absolutely.
You know, it's really positive. It's constructive, and hopefully we can all build on this one here.
Certainly, we intend to build on this because the people who we invite to discuss here, we stay connected. You know, this is it just becomes the beginning for all of us, and we intend to do the same with you, not just with this book, but your forthcoming books, even otherwise. You know, I have another, if I can voice it out here in front of all the participants. You know, I have been trying to get hold of, John Andrew Marrow. You know, because that book fascinates me. His book on the covenants of the prophet with Christians.
I can write to him. I mean, I know John. I know John well.
That would be great if you could do that, because we would like to invite him here for another discussion, perhaps with you, and you can have a small panel discussion, because you have quoted him extensively in your book, and I have been trying to get that book. I'm not able to get the book. And if you can connect me to John Andrew Marrow, that would be great. We will invite him here. We can have a small panel discussion with you.
I will. I'll do that soon. Yeah, I'll just write an email.
Just one question.
Sorry, can I ask one question also?
I think Mazhar Bhai preceded you. Maybe we'll give it. Most importantly, we'll have to ask Craig for that. You know, Craig,
Mr. Faiz Bhai, give the preference to the lady. I'll follow her.
Okay. No, but let us ask Craig, because we don't know whether he has time.
My question and the answer will be only 2 minutes.
Hold on. We'll ask Craig first whether he can take a question.
But you want? There's 2 more questions.
Yeah, 2 more.
Yeah. Okay. It's quick. Yeah. If we can do it quick. Yeah.
The lady first.
No, I don't
Miss
have a
Aisha.
question. I was just going to say that thank you so much, but I really wanted Mr. John Andrew Morrow, because I've read the book and
Great.
it's amazing and very depressing book. So I definitely would love to have him
Yes.
on your show.
that
I
would
think
be
you are
great.
referring to the different book.
Oh, I was referring to the book.
Most controversial verse in the Quran.
Yeah,
434.
Oh yeah, his new book.
yeah,
Yeah.
his new book.
434.
Yeah.
Yeah, 434, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway,
So
we'll
that
have a
was just
discussion
a
on that too.
Yeah, sorry.
As a lady, you will be
Yes, thank you
interested
so
in
much.
that 434. Waziri Bahunna.
Yeah.
So I think, Mazhar Bhai, go ahead. I think.
Yeah. Craig, just one personal question, if you don't mind.
Mhm.
Do you play tennis?
No, but I could. I'm a good athlete, so I could do it.
No, just behind you, I could use the small. I could see the small
deuce.
deuce you have put there. So I thought you must be a tennis player, and then you
That's
love
funny.
tennis.
So deuce is how I explain the process of pluralism to my students. So we've been talking a lot about getting active, and deuce is like a peace sign. And it stands for dialogue, education, understanding, commitment, and engagement. And that's how we actually can realize and practice pluralism in our lives. My wife made that for me. Really cool, cool little gift. But I do not play tennis, but I do play a lot of sports.
Great.
I must say, from the so many things I learned from this session is the new definition of deuce. You've given me 5 meanings for it. I'm
There
going
you
to
go.
remember that. Thank you very much.
That's awesome. Thank you.
In other words, I think there was nothing that we left out, including deuce.
Yeah, we got in a lot. It was a great conversation. Very deep. Good way to start my day here in Houston.
Wonderful. That's great to know. Craig. So wonderful. Thanks a lot once again. I thank all the participants for being around here till the end. That shows the kind of interest they had in this session, and that shows the commitment for this cause too, in a sense. And this is how our what do you call, all our discussions have been like this. We say 2 hours and goes up to 2.5 hours. That has been the case, Craig, with all our discussions.
Awesome.
So therefore, we'd like to expand them further with John and Romero, inshallah, and also with you in the future. So
Sounds
thank
good.
you so much.
Thank you
for your time.
Thank you, and God bless you all. Thank you again.
Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God, if I may quote from the Bible.
Yes.
Amen. Thank you all. God bless.